Welcome to Steak News. I'm Emilio Pagon.
And I'm Steven Francisco. Last day of school is in 2 days. It's crazy.
Students are very upset because they cannot take the pressure of finals. And some have gone to the point of ripping test materials. We have footage of this rare event. Let's go to John Carlo to see these students in action.
Thank you, Emilio. Here we are in Westmore discussing with students the stress of finals. And here we are with student Jalen Mabana as he shows us the way he relieves his stress. Back to you, Steven.
Thanks, Giancarlo. Wow, that student really ripped up those papers. Well, here's a general background for Cuba. Cuba's diversity in their culture, weather, and government differs them from other countries. Cuba is known for its spectacular views, beaches, and cuisines. Its cruises over the Caribbean are beyond magnificent and breathtaking. Also, the Cuban cuisines differ them from other countries. Cubans love the diversity in food, which come from the Spanish, Americans, Africans, French, Arabic, and the Chinese. It's a mix of cultures around the world. To every country, there are their downsides. Although Cuba is beautiful, the government is a one-party communist state. There are only 5 countries that follow communism. Not allowed to speak against the president or the regime. If spoken against the president or the regime, you'll be sent to prison. In addition, poverty plays an important role of Cubans. Many Cuban residents are living under a roof with 20 other people because of how poor everyone is. And the Soviet Union plays the role of a bigger brother of Cuba. U.S. still considers Cuba as a threat. All these problems tie in with the important events dating back to World War II and even before that. We have Giancarlo talking about the Spanish-American War. Giancarlo?
Thanks, guys. So now we're going to talk about the history of our country, Cuba. In 1869, Cuba declared its independence and fought a 10-year war against their ruler, Spain. In 1878, with the island in ruins, the Cubans gave up the fight, but some Cubans continued to seek independence from Spain. In 1895, Jose Marti, a writer who had been exiled from Cuba by the Spanish, returned to launch a second war for independence. Marti was killed early in the fighting, but the Cubans battled him. In the 1890s, the United States had developed a substantial business holdings in Cuba, therefore it had an economic stake in the fate of the country. In addition, the Spanish had forced many Cuban civilians into concentration camps. Americans objected to Spanish brutality. In 1898, the United States joined the Cuban War for Independence. This conflict, which became known as the Spanish-American War, lasted for about 4 months. The U.S. forces launched their first attack not on Cuba but on the Philippine Islands. Their first attack not on Cuba, the Spanish colony thousands miles away in the Pacific. Unprepared for war on 2 fronts, the Spanish military collapsed quickly. In 1901, Cuba became an independent nation, at least in name. However, the United States installed a military government and continued to exert control over Cuban affairs. This caused tremendous resentment among many Cubans who had assumed that the United States' aim in intervening was to help them. The split that developed between the United States and Cuba at this time continues to keep these close neighbors miles apart for more than a century later. After its defeat in the Spanish-American War, Spain turned over the last of its colonies, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, which they all became U.S. territories. Having become the dominant imperial power in Latin America, the United States set next sights on Panama. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Giancarlo, for the Spanish-American War. Now here's Andrew with the Cuban Missile Crisis. Andrew?
After World War II ended in 1945, we all thought there would be peace. Instead, the Cold War started in 1947. Cuba played an important part in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Castro was deeply involved. Kennedy's demand for the removal of Soviet missiles put the United States and the Soviet Union on a collision course. People around the world feared nuclear war. Fortunately, Khrushchev agreed to remove the missiles in return for a U.S. promise not to invade Cuba. Back to you, Emilio.
Thanks, Andrew. Emilio's not here right now, but he's outside playing sports. Let's talk about Cuba's favorite sport. Emilio?
National sport is baseball. Their most successful player that got out of Cuba is Yoenis Cespedes. He played in the MLB on the Oakland A's for about 4 years, but last year, midway through the season, he was traded. He now plays with the Boston Red Sox and is doing great. But unfortunately for the A's, that was a horrible mistake. because now they have the worst record in the league with a 14-21. Back to you, Steven.
Wow, what a hit by Emilio. Damn, that went far. Well, we have Andrew now with the weather in Cuba. Andrew?
Thanks, Steven. Here we have the weather of Cuba over here. We have Havana. It's pretty hot in there. It's crazy. Cienfuegos over here, right there, is pretty warm. Nuvetas is pretty hot. Cayman Islands, I don't know about the weather there, but Santiago de Cuba, that's pretty hot. It's crazy there. That's all I got. Back to you guys.
And now the current issues in Cuba. Cuba is now starting to build relationships with us, America. Because our relations were broken in the Cuban Missile Crisis because we had no trust. And now Cuba is in a serious drought just like us in California. What can we do to solve these problems? Well, we need to build trust again. We have to know that we can count on one another in any situation. And about the drought in Cuba, they need to ask us maybe for help, or ask any allies that they have for help with this drought. That's all I have.
Breaking news! We have Andrew here with the Cuban citizen, Esteban Garcia, who is talking about the regime. Let's go to him now.
Thank you guys. Here we have Esteban here. What do you think about the communist state of Cuba?
I hate the communist state.
Sit down! You're under arrest for talking against the regime! You have the right to remain silent!
Back to you, Emilio.
What a tackle by that Cuban policeman. He really looks like me. I'm Emilio Pagan.
I'm Steve Francisco.
Thank you for tuning in to Second News. Next week we will talk about more on the issues of Cuba. For now, okay.
Andrew, say hi to Bloopers.
We should have just printed it out.
Say hi to Bloopers, Steven.
Nothing.
Say hi.
Really? Oh my. Alright, thanks guys. Here we have Giancarlo Padilla here. What do you think about the communist state of Cuba?
Pues a mí honestamente no me gusta.
Over here in Cuba. Oh, it's not Cuba.
Oh my.
Instead, the Cold War. Thanks, Emilio. Here we have.
And I'm Steve Francisco. Last day of school is in 2 days. It's crazy.